Hello there, Brandon here, coming to you from the studio today. Another quick painting video. This time something a little different for me. We're gonna look at a painting that I did here with all palette knife or painting knife. If you want to try this one and do something. This one is Dogwood Blossoms, all palette knife painting. If you want to paint along with this one with me, let's go have a look. Okay, so I have another small 6x8 canvas here, but this time we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I'll be doing this whole painting with some painting knives or palette knives, whatever you want to call them. I've got a couple of different sizes that I'll be using, but I'm going to start with the longest knife that I've got here to cover the most ground quickly, because I will try to get a background in on here, and I want to be able to spread as much paint as I can in a short period of time, because I'm going to be doing this with acrylics. Now you could certainly do this in oil paints, and you'd have a lot more time to spread things around and move some color and that jazz, but I'm going to go with acrylics. I want this to actually dry fairly quickly, so my finished product will be ready to hang up, and I can pretty much achieve what I want to do with the acrylics. But that being said, I'm going to start with a background, and I'm going to be doing probably like some pink kind of flowers on a dogwood tree here. My mom's a dogwood tree fan, so that's what I'm going to be doing. So my background is going to be colors associated with that, so there's going to be some pinks back there, magenta and red, but I'm going to really fade all this out to start out with, so the background will look out of focus and in the distance, and then we'll have a foreground limb with some flowers here in the front that'll be much sharper in color and appear much closer to the foreground. Now, if you want to do different color flowers than that, you certainly can. Just where I'm doing pinks, obviously you do a different color, so if you want purple flowers or yellow flowers or whatever you want to do, you just do a different color. But I'm going to start with putting some white right on my canvas. And this is just so I can push some stuff around pretty quickly. And I'm also going to, I think, drop a little bit of gray in here in a couple of places. You can put a tiny bit of black in if you want. This is just to keep things from being completely white, obviously. And I'm just going to start moving this paint around, trying to cover up as much canvas as I can here. No real rhyme or reason to what I'm doing here at the moment, other than just covering up the canvas with paint. I'm not doing anything specific here in terms of directions or places that I'm putting any kind of color. I'm just trying to get mostly a white but not pure white background going on, which is why I added just a touch of gray in there to spread around with it. And trying to get pretty much full coverage of color back there. Don't want any bare spots. And you can leave as much painting knife texture in there as you want, or flatten it out as much as you want. That's entirely up to you. I'm going to leave some texture in back there. Here's where we want to keep things really muted back there in the distance, so don't add a lot. I'm going to go again with some pinks here, so I'm going to go with a tiny touch of magenta on the end of my palette knife there, and just start to introduce that color into a couple of places. And start small, because you can always add more if you need to and cover things up. But you want to keep it very muted back there in the background. So I'm going to have indications of what would be other flowers back there off in the distance. But we don't want to go overboard with this at all. So again, keep it really muted. Gray it out a lot, which is why I put white and gray on the canvas. And just create some distant shapes back there that could be some form of whatever flowers you're going for. So whatever your color flowers are going to be, that's what you want to achieve at this point. So again, I'm sticking with a lot of magenta and a lot of red, putting it on my canvas here, and then just blending it back with that gray that I've already got on the canvas to really tone it down. Now we're going to start introducing a few other things, because we got branches back there obviously that these are on. So in a few places I'm going to touch in just a hint of black and a little bit of green, because there's going to be leaves back there too. And I'm going to start creating some things that could be branches and leaves back there in the distance. So you want to create, again, some shapes back there without being too specific. So drawing in some lines that could be some kind of a branch back there, and some things back there that could be leaves. A little bit of green mixed in. Put a little bit of blue in with my black, just so it's not completely black. If you kind of just keep working this in back there, it will stay very muted in color again, off in the distance. Nothing that we want showing up real vibrant. And again, I'm just kind of randomly dropping in things back there. Tiny bits of black, little bits of pink, little bits of green. Anything that would be associated with dogwood trees blooming. And then I'm just going to kind of come back and knock out some of my palette knife marks. I don't want them to be too crazy in the background, because again, it's in the background in the distance back there. So I'm going to keep them a little bit not real sharp and obvious. Something about like that. And it's perfectly fine to go into some of these that you've put in that are still wet and drag that color to someplace else. We ultimately want a variety of things going on back there. I think that's pretty good now. You tip that slightly so that glare is not on there, and I'll have to fix that glare issue. But so that's about what I'm working with at the moment. You can see that I've just got some stuff going on back there. I think I'm going to add just a hint more dark, maybe what would be limb stuff going on over in this direction. So that's about what I've got going on right now. That's a pretty good background to start with. So what we're going to have to do now is kind of let that dry, which, depending on how thick your paint is, that might take a few minutes. So we're going to have to let that dry, and then we'll come back and work on our foreground limbs and flowers. So we'll pick up there. Alright, now that my background is pretty good and dry there, I have shortened my painting knife to a smaller one here, just for a little better control. And I'm going to start with putting in some main branches here are limbs that we're going to be working around to do the rest of our flowers. So I'm going to use mostly black and blue and a little bit of green mixed in there. I'm not gonna use any brown to do this with, just because. And then I'm going to basically just draw in some limbs coming in from somewhere. Now maybe we'll come in from the top. And draw a limb in here. Now keep in mind, if there's anything there on your background that you don't particularly love the looks of, you can cover that part up. If there's some stuff there that you do like the looks of, try not to cover that part up. So you might want to look at what you've got sitting down there before you get moving. And we will come back and, you know, do highlights and stuff on this stuff that we're dropping in here. So right now we're just trying to get, I don't want to cover my whole big flower up there in the back. I'm kind of going to work around him a little bit. Let's take a branch off of this direction. And you just have to make some decisions here on where you want your limbs to go. I mean, I'm not doing anything specific here. I'm just kind of making it up as I go. Now there's another portion that's going to drop off, maybe down this way. Alright, now to create a few interesting things in there, we're going to add couple of places where some little buds of leaves will come off. Maybe there's one there, maybe there's one there, one in there somewhere. And now for the leaves to get in there, I'm going to go into mostly some sap green with a tiny bit of that black mixed into it, and then I'm going to lighten it up a fair amount with some titanium white. And just kind of drop in a couple of budding leaf shapes, mainly using the shape of your palette knife to kind of get it done. And I might darken that up a little bit more with a touch more black. Just to vary up my leaves here, they're not all quite the same color. Some of them are a little further along than others, maybe. And maybe there's a tiny one coming off right there. And then in a few places you want to make your leaf shapes a good bit different, because maybe you're catching one kind of on its side as opposed to seeing the whole profile of the leaf. So you can put some random lines in there that will give us the impression that it's a different angle that you're seeing the leaf from, and not just straight on. They won't all be turned in the same direction is what I'm getting at, obviously. And heck, maybe there's a leaf coming in from off the picture a little bit, from another branch that we don't even see. Who knows? While we're working with those leaves, let's do a little bit of highlighting in there, just to break it up a little bit. So I'm going to take some titanium white and drop it in that mix and get just a little bit on the end of my knife there. and then come in here and just touch along some of the edges of some of these leaves that we did. Yeah, the places that the leaf is maybe curled up a little bit on some edges. Who knows what we got going on. Just changing the appearance of them a little bit here and there, putting some highlight in some places. It just adds to the overall finished product, makes things look a little more realistic. When it's all said and done. Alright, now let's work on our branch a little bit in terms of highlighting it out. I'm going to go into black and blue again, a little bit of green. This time we're going to add a little titanium white to our mix. And let's see about creating some highlights on our limb. Just maybe kind of come up with where you want a light source to come from and lighten up one side more than you do another. I'm just going to say it's coming from somewhere off the top of this canvas. Trying to get all of my tops of my branch here highlighted out, and I'm actually going to come back and do the top edge with a really thin palette knife that I've got with a little brighter color. Let's see, I don't know what, maybe I'll go right down the middle of this one because maybe it's coming down towards us. Alright, now I've got a palette knife that's got a pretty skinny point to it, which, I mean, if you don't have one of those, it's not overly necessary. Just get you a paint roll along the edge and go into a little more titanium white to brighten that mix up even more than what we had before, and come right along the top edge. With your brightest highlight. And what's nice about this is that palette knife texture that is underneath on our original background layer actually creates nice bark texture or tree limb texture for you when you're adding these highlights without you having to really do anything. It just kind of automatically does it for you. You just drag your knife across there. The peaks of the texture underneath will pick up more paint as you move across. Alright, I think that's about all I'm going to do for our branch. Now we need to get into the business of making some flowers. I'm going to go to my little short stubby knife here, just again so I have a little more control of this. And again, I'm doing pink flowers. I'm going to go into mostly magenta and add a little bit of red to it, but it's more magenta than it is red. And then throw some white in there as well. Create me a nice little pink looking color. Let's start with what? Let's start with maybe the back side of this. And drop in some flower petaled shape things. We can come back and refine when we're done. You have to make a few decisions on maybe where you want individual petals sticking out. Let's put in, how do we want to do this? I don't want to completely cover up that one behind me, but I do want to make a flower somewhere in here. Let's put one in, maybe right in there. Stick another one in coming out back there, maybe just randomly. Put a little bit of one in here. Starting. Maybe we'll drop a piece, another one coming off of the canvas back there. Big one right there. Maybe there's a piece of another one behind it. Oh, maybe there's a part of one sticking up on the back side there that we can make out. Maybe the bottom of it is over there somewhere. And one last one somewhere in here. Now at another point where I need to maybe let this dry a little bit, but I think I want to create some flatter, broader petals on some of these larger ones. That way when we come back in to kind of highlight it out, it'll look a little more like I want it to. So I'm just kind of flattening out some of that texture that's in there. So when I come back and highlight it, I can create individual petals with my highlights as opposed to relying on that underneath texture to dictate what that flower looks like. We can always add that texture back with our highlight passes if we want to create specific textures for our individual petals for sure. We'll give that a few minutes to dry now and then come back and work on top of that. Alright, now we want to highlight out these flower petals a little bit, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to lighten up the tips of all of the outer edges of them by going into the mix that we created our flower with there, but adding a little more titanium white to it. And we'll start on this largest one, and on the outer rim of some of these places we're going to lighten up the edges and I want to create the look that some of these petals are overlapping one another, so we're going to have a darker area where these two here are going to overlap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lighten up a mid area here that will give the impression that those two petals are overlapping, and do the same thing over here. It doesn't take much to give the indication. That's all you're trying to achieve at this point. Again, we're talking about suggestion. Is all you're trying to add as the artist, that there's something going on there. I'm going to lighten up the outer edge of this petal. Now down here I'm going to put a highlight right along the top edge, just like that, to make it look we're kind of looking down in there, and then we'll come back in and add some little stem looking things. Want to darken up the center of that, go into just a tiny bit of magenta. Alright, now you just kind of do the same thing around your other flowers here. Create whatever petals you want visible. Now I need to finish off my painting here with basically the little stamens and things that are on the insides of these flowers, and so for that I'm going to go back into some green with a little bit of blue in it, and then add some titanium white to lighten things up. And then let's touch in with the corner of the edge of our knife. We're going to come in here and drop in a few individual little, we can see the top of a few maybe hanging out of this flower. We can definitely see some coming up out of this one. And basically just use the edge of your knife to carve out some lines in that once you put the color on there. And then I'm going to add just a touch more blue to that mix and a fair bit more white to brighten up the tips of that even more there, and put like a little dot of that color towards the top of these things. And honestly, that's about all you really have to do to create this particular project. So if you have a look at how that finished up there with that texture, we basically have a variety of petals going on there, lots of texture in this. So I hope you have something that you are happy with on that. Until next time, happy painting, everybody.